Hi, Pastor Donna. It's so great to have you join me today. I'm so excited that we've been reading your book, A New Day in the City, and we're talking about it on January 11th. Chip Hardwick is coming in to lead that conversation. And so just wanted to have a little time with you, asking you some questions. And maybe before we get started with that, I wanted to mention how we got connected through, I believe, one of your congregants, Laura Hale. And I remember Laura and I were friends together at Duke Youth Academy. We met back in the summer of 2007 or 2008. And I never forget the moment when our eyes met for the first time. We're in like the same like small cohort cabin group. And our leader said, okay, I want all of you, we have liberal Christians here, we have conservative Christians, and you get in a line and like describe yourself. I remember Laura was the girl who went all the way on the side of the progressive side, and then I was the boy who went all the way on the side of the conservative side. And then we
Huh.
both kind of looked down the row at each other, like, who are you? How can you be that person? And then we had all these conversations, and it's wonderful, and we still talk.
That's amazing though, but that means that there's a chance that we could have met before because wait, no, 2007. No, I was a mentor with the Youth Academy around 2003 and 2004. So I
Okay.
love the Duke Youth Academy. Yeah, so I love it. Love
Fantastic.
it.
Yeah.
Good.
And my
Is
brother and
that
his
where you
wife both are
experienced?
Duke. That's where I went there for Duke Youth Academy. My brother and his wife both did the seminary there. But I went to Princeton Seminary. So yeah,
Okay. Okay. Thank you for drawing the connection. Yeah, the Duke Youth Academy was an incredible thing.
so great. Yeah. So one reason I love your book, and I feel silly for starting out with a quote from another book, but it's been going around the Great De-Churching. And I thought the statistic that he said was so relevant in giving shape to the problem that not only your church experienced, but that all of our churches in American Christianity are. That you have it right there. You're reading it. You know it. Yeah, I think he started out by saying that 40 million people who used to call themselves Christian in America over the last 25 years have left the church, and that is more than the combined efforts of the First and Second Great Awakening and the Billy Graham Crusades combined. And I think a lot of people who maybe aren't familiar with the statistics and that narrative often look at their church and say, oh, we used to have, this many people, and what did we do wrong that we're not that anymore? And the idea is like, oh, if we can do the right thing, then we'll get back to that. And I think in some ways that is maybe being a bit too harsh on themselves, and also maybe getting back to that shouldn't be the goal of faithfulness. I wonder if there's some parallels between um, your church in DC. I'm in a small city of Ashland, Ohio, 20,000 people. But back in the 1930s or 40s, we're a 200-year-old church. We peaked around 2,000 members. We had, and that's in the context of a city of 20,000 people. So like 10% of the population was a member of the church. And so that's like what our infrastructure is built for. We have honestly, like not bragging, probably the most beautiful sanctuary in like mid-central Ohio. It's gorgeous. And we have all these outbuildings and Sunday school rooms that were built to accommodate that. And, we have 50, 60 faithful worshipers, on a Sunday. And, if we have like everyone together at Christmas Eve or Easter, we'll have like 100 people. But that's a far cry from, 2,000 people and like taking the windows out and violating fire code to get everyone seated in there.
Yep. I know the whole story well. Yes. Yes. Everything about what you said resonates.
And, I'm wondering, when you came to that church, you described it as, the majority of people were in their 90s, and, maybe 50 faithful people there. And one thing that struck me is it sounded like those people had a deep honesty, but also maybe needed to grow in honesty about themselves. And what were the kinds of conversations that, open them up to maybe a greater honesty about their story and a greater openness, to change. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll let you take it from there.
I think that that's a really good question. So at Mount Vernon Place, part of we didn't have to be fully honest at the time of my arrival because we had entered into a partnership with the Chinese Community Church. And so the Chinese Community Church had been here for 10 years. At the time, they had a really small property and a much larger congregation. We had a massive piece of property and building square footage and a declining small congregation. And so these two congregations came together. So when I first got here, the shared English service was all together. So if you came on a Sunday, you might see 120 people in the pews, 80 of whom were members of the Chinese Community Church and 40 were part of Mount Vernon Place. And so the bills were still being paid. It didn't look as barren as it could have. And so part of it was getting them to really see just how vulnerable they were. And so there was also at the time $1 million in the bank. And they had basically said, we're spending the money. And when the money's gone, we're just going to close the doors and turn the keys over. So they knew that whole mantra, right? That if we that the property goes back to the denomination, they literally would talk about handing the keys over. And so they knew that reality, and yet they didn't have to see it every day, right? When they walked in. And so I think more than getting them to see their reality was helping them see some of the reality of just how much their community was changing, which I realize is different than Ashland, Ohio, that we're in downtown DC. And many of them had not seen what was happening just 4 blocks away. And so we scheduled a movie one night just to go and see, right? Let's just go and see this, what's happening in the community. But then to also revisit some of our past and to start telling some of those stories again about what had made a real and vital difference. And not everything from the past was continuing to make a difference, but there were many things in our past that still could make a real and vital difference. And so helping them tell that truth, that was part of their story. So like, how do you start telling that truth? These are things that we don't need 4,541 members to do again. We don't need that many members to bless people in our community that need a blessing. And then the reality too, you just told me about someone that you baptized on Christmas Eve before we went and
Yeah.
started recording. That's part of your reality, right? Someone found
Mm-hmm.
or discovered a relationship with Jesus through the ministries of your church. And so are all of your members seeing that? Do they know the story about what led to that person wanting to make that decision? And so part of seeing the reality isn't just seeing the challenging part, but it's also seeing the reality of this is still what we could do. I mean, how did Ashland First Pres become 2,000 members? What were the things that made a real difference? And I suspect that some of those storylines are the same that we were finding. People long for community, right? We know that
Mm-hmm.
loneliness is a health epidemic of incredible proportions right now that is having
Absolutely.
devastating effects. And that loneliness is something that people of all ages experience. It's something that it doesn't matter if you're single or married, right? I mean, you know what it feels like to be to be lonely, to be longing, to be seen, to be longing to find your place of belonging. And so I suspect that when it was 2,000 people, that there were multiple opportunities for people to find their place of belonging. And so what are those places of belonging? What is your truth? Like, what are those places? And are they working, and are there enough of them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for a new person to come in?
Absolutely. And I think of, going back to the story of the of Young who was baptized on Christmas Eve. He met our church because we did something totally different. We had there are 3 churches that neighbor our property. Literally, if I opened up my office window, I could see all of them. If I shout loud enough, the other pastors could hear me. And so we decided, no, we're going to throw up a big wedding tent in the park between us, and we're worshiping together under that tent. And Young was new to the city, and this woman he didn't know, and he never saw her again, said, "Oh, you should go to worship here." He's asking where to worship. I saw this. And so he went, and like that's how he got connected. And we have a college outreach group on Tuesdays, and then we have a coffee house we do for them once a month, and a bunch of other things. And yeah, that's really vital. And like when I go there, one of the leaders, Nana, she does a tea time and Bible study on Thursdays, and I'll sit there and like I've had around like 3 to 5 languages, like just passing around that table, and people who like, oh, they know Spanish, but they don't know English. And so somebody's translating for them, and they know Chinese, but they don't know Spanish, but this person knows English. And it's just wonderful community coming together. Um, and I think of all the people who you might not think like, oh, rural Rust Belt town in Ohio. You maybe not think of that diversity immediately, but it's there, and people are finding a home.
Right, and the commonality, 5 languages, but the commonality is that you have created space. So you have
Hmm.
created space, and once someone comes, there are other people who are looking for them, who are expecting them. I mean, it's a friend of mine posted something on Facebook the other day about how someone was talking about how when they came to church, they were a little bit late, and everyone turned around like and were almost disgusted that you came really late. But then this
Hmm.
person said, when I come to AA, if I'm late, everyone says, oh my goodness, I am so thankful that you are here, because if you weren't here, it would mean that something might have gone wrong. So, like, how do
Hmm.
we even approach people? And how do we train our longtime members or the remnant that is there to not only look for the people that they expect to see, but especially to be looking and praying for the people that they're not expecting to see?
Oh, absolutely, totally. Um, and I do, and there's always that tension, there is, and I love the people who come and become part of the community. And I think that and this is nothing I've done, but they do a pretty good job of being welcoming. I know people who said they have, not felt welcome in many places, and but they come here and they feel loved, and I like, oh, that's us doing the work of Christ. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But there's always more that you can do. There are your own challenges that come with being, a big steeple church. I was telling someone about a small group we were having. I thought that she might be interested, and their response was like, "Oh, but is that only for church people?" And I said, "Well, certainly hope not. Hope that everything that we do is open."
And where are you hosting it? Why are like, then it may also be an invitation to not host whatever gathering that is in the building, even though you
Hmm.
have that much
Hmm.
space in the building that needs to be
Yeah.
used. But what does it look
Hmm.
like to also host some of those gatherings outside of the building as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Like I know I love our Tuesday lunches that we do. We have like a $50,000 kitchen here, but we hold it in the basement of a college place. And the kitchen is not nearly as good, but it works, and that's
That's
where the
great.
kids are, and so we go to meet them. Um, I really appreciate what you said about no silver bullets. On page 71, I might read this passage. I have a similar line. I think sometimes people
I
get
should get my
really
book. Hang
excited.
on.
Oh,
I
okay.
should have
You
had
get
it
your
in
book.
front of me. Wait, let me see if I can put my hands on one. You may have to read it to me.
Okay.
No, you're gonna have to read it to me. I can't put my hands on one at the moment. All right.
No
There's
worries.
there's a box of them here somewhere, but go ahead.
I'm sure there is. Any congregation in decline may be tempted to believe they can win people with higher energy worship, creative PowerPoint presentations, and better music. You may very well be able to boost your average worship attendance with such methods, but there is a far more powerful way of winning people, and it starts with embodying the new commandment Jesus gives to disciples in the Gospel of John. Love each other, just as I've loved you, you must also love each other. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other. And, I don't, the problems are the same, whether you have fog machines or incense. And also, I've been in communities that have praise bands and that have incense every Sunday, and both of those have really thriving and deep communities. And like neither one of those is like, oh, you're this is the model for success. And I think, in some ways it'd be really easy. Like church planting. Sometimes I get a little jealous of my church planting brothers and sisters. And there's a place for that. There is. But in some ways, it's really easy you can just like, oh, like hop on the trend and you can do whatever the trend is. And it's a very different thing when, oh, we have this group of people. I want to do something that brings us all along together. And just doing this one thing or that thing, or if we look like Rick Warren's church, like, oh, then people will come. And I think it's more complicated than that, but I appreciate the complicated and hopeful picture that you offer.
Yeah, there's not a gimmick at all. There's not a recipe. There's not one passage of scripture. Well, maybe there is one passage of scripture. The disciples held all things in common. They ate together with glad and generous hearts day by day. Right. I mean, Acts 2, like I think if there is one scripture to follow, that would be it. But I think every congregation has to figure out what is authentic to them and what
Hmm.
is so authentic that it becomes natural in how they offer that. And so, for us, it was trying to figure out how do we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And for
Hmm.
us, it was very much wrapped into people who are experiencing homelessness, people who are all around us. And so that was eventually that curiosity about how do we love our neighbors, we love ourselves, is what led to the start of a shower ministry some 15 or so years ago, which has been on pause since 2020, which is about to get restarted again next month, for which we're so grateful. But how do we do that? And then how do we really try to love one another, the people who are in the pews with us, particularly those
Hmm.
people who may not love like us, who may not look like us, who may not act like us, whatever that might be. How do we embody a stance where it is truly non-judgmental and curious and filled with love?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. I maybe shifting gears a little bit. In your chapter about pruning, I was wondering, what did it feel like, as a pastor, as a congregation, to go through that pruning process? Um, and as you know, so I'm the youngest person in my church, except for some of the kids running around, and I have the benefit of a short memory but a long history. And so like my memory of the congregation, I've been here 2 years. It's a very short memory. Um, but I can go back and I can read the history and I can do all that. And I'm like, oh, I have a long view of your history. And I think about how this church has pruned itself so many times in the past. Like we weren't always on the corner of Church and Third Street. We started in 1814 in a log cabin, and we outgrew that. And then we came here and we built a church, and we outgrew that and tore it down, and then built a big brick church, and it burned down and then built this. And so we've never been tied to one building or even one place. And even a name, we used to be called the Hopewell Presbyterian Church. Now we're the First Presbyterian Church. Um, but I think that it's easy to lose sight of, oh no, we have changed so much over our past, and our future will do that too. But it's hard to let things go in the midst of it. And I'm wondering what
Right.
that process was like for you.
Yeah. So when I was doing a lot of speaking on A New Day in the City, I found a video by Ray Drummond, the Pioneer Woman. And it's this video that talks, and she's talking about how spring is always her favorite time on the ranch because she can see new life emerge. And then she shows two fields split by a road. And on one of the fields, one side of the road, the field is lush and green. And Ray Drummond says this is the field that was completely cleared off. So it was completely cleared off, completely, I don't know if it's burned or if it's just combined in order to get it to be that barren. And then there's this lush new life where everything is green. And then the camera continues to go across, and then the land that is not growing anything is the land that nothing happened to, right? That they just let basically go. And so in agriculture, we know that in order for something to become lush and alive again, it has to be cut as far back as it possibly can. And this video is so powerful because of the way she shows just what is possible when you literally let go of any life that was remaining, right? In order to get back to the beginning. And so I will admit, with Mount Vernon Place, we had to prune because we had to vacate our property. And so that was part
Mhm.
of it. When we were redeveloping our property, we had to let go of everything. I say we had to let go of junk. I mean, junk in our closets, but also junk on our calendar.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
really taking up space, but not making a difference. And
Hmm.
so that's only then, once everything was gone, that's when we got to see, okay, but wait, where is there still life that's ready to push up, that's ready to like be nurtured? Because what was depleting us, nobody was eager to put to pill up again, right? Nobody was eager to say,
Hmm.
okay, I'm gonna tend to this. Like there is still this little remnant of a plant here, and I'm gonna do everything I can to water this plant and to let it grow, but there wasn't the energy to do that. And then, like, the energy all gravitated towards, oh, wait, this is what feels like it has the capacity to grow and to be the strongest. And new life emerged as well. In the book, we give you an opportunity, or we invite you to do a whole inventory of everything your church is doing, everything, whether it's buying poinsettias at Christmas, buying Easter lilies at Easter, small groups, your lunch that you just said that you have on campus for the, or wherever you go for the students. So to literally inventory everything, and then to think about like what is producing life, what is contributing to your mission and ministry, what has led to a new person becoming part of your church, what has led to a longtime person growing deeper in their faith, like what is happening, and then what is not, and then to ask, why are we still doing those things, right? I mean, if when we look at how we invest our money, if you have a
Hmm.
retiree or someone who is not a retiree but who's really good at the stock market, if a stock is continuing to produce and multiply, you keep your money there. But if a stock isn't, right, if it's part of a business that is going underground, you don't keep your stock there. You don't keep your investment there. And so why do we
Hmm.
continue to invest the church's time and our members, I mean, church's treasure, and our members' invaluable time and the treasure that they give to the church's treasure in stuff that isn't multiplying?
Yeah. And I think of the importance of investing in things that multiply and building those relationships. This is a story from another church, and they are talking about what are the missions that your church is doing, and somebody said, oh, there's this. I think it was a soup kitchen or some kind of food ministry that they do where they provide a meal, and we go there every Saturday, and we've been doing it for 10 years. And he's like, oh wow, that's amazing. So that means um, you have visited this place like 500 times and spent all these hours there, and all these dozens of people going there. And he said, tell me some of the names and stories of the people that you've met. Um, and you could hear a pin drop. And in those 10 years, in those hundreds of visits, nobody learned a name. There's no relationship. And, but, oh, it was the thing that made them feel good doing it, but
Yep.
there wasn't actually any fruit there. And it's not saying that having a soup kitchen, is a bad thing. It's probably a good thing, and there are people that need that. And I look at so many things. We you know, I thought of there's this after school Bible program that we support. And like, oh, like tell me about some of the kids that you've gotten to know. And like nobody knows any of them. And like, okay, why are we supporting this? Those are the kinds of things like we can let go because we are a small church. And I get it. People are tired and they only have so much energy to give. So why don't we actually invest that in places where it's growing?
Yep, exactly. Why is the church so reluctant to learn that or to do that?
I think part of it is a kind of brutal honesty that, you know, it's a nostalgia, I think sometimes, that, oh, this was really good, maybe at one time. Um, it's so hard to let go of
Yeah,
things. Um,
yeah,
and and especially like I have a lot of empathy. I realize I've been a highly mobile person. I've lived in many different places. Even though I've been here just over 2 calendar years. This is the longest I have been in a place for like the last decade. Because like when I was in school, I'd be back and forth during the summers and yada yada yada. And oh, like these people have they've been serving here and rooted here for like 80 years, plowing this field and taking care of it. And so to have those conversations that are respectful and honoring of those gifts, and also saying like, oh, but maybe we could go this way.
yeah,
And wouldn't that be joyful? And helping people see the joy. Because I think it's a lot easier to see the joy in what used to be than to see the joy in what could be. Like I referenced it earlier in our conversation. We had that big tent worship last summer, and we had 144 people there. And it had been 14 years since our church had 144 people in worship on a Sunday. And it was great. And people kept on saying, oh, this is wonderful. Like, how can we do it again? How can we do this again? And so this year, actually coming up in January 28th, we're having 6 churches instead of 3 come together. And we're doing it 4 times this year. Um, and like, oh yeah, no, we can do this. We can find this unity that's greater than ourselves. And yeah, it could maybe look a little different. But remember how joyful that was,
right.
and imagine how joyful this can be. Um,
Yeah. I had a marriage counselor say, that he was working with a couple and the couple was really struggling to make any big decisions. And he said, the problem with you two is that you are too nice to each other. And so you are so nice to each other that you're afraid that you might hurt one another's feelings. And so you don't know how to negotiate. But what if we instead taught our people how to do perhaps not negotiation, but deep discernment that might hurt someone? And if it hurts someone slightly, could still lead to the greater benefit of the whole, right? Because this couple was stuck. They were very stuck. Neither of them was super content or happy, but they needed to learn how to talk with each other in a way that could make decisions that maybe one person didn't get everything that they wanted, but in the long run, they were going to be much more healthier and more full of vitality.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to be mindful of your time. I think I said half an hour, and we're coming up on half an hour. Um, but I kind of wanted to close with this quote and then hear what that experience was like from you from page 128. Several people have said that Mount Vernon Place is like a new church since over 75% of our congregation has joined or come to the church in the last decade. Those words couldn't be further from the truth, however. Mount Vernon Place is alive today because a group of older adults were willing to let go of so much of what they knew and loved, including buildings they helped to build and traditions they cherished, in order to make space for God to do a new thing. And the same can happen in your community, regardless of how many people you have to start with or what the average age of your congregation might be.
It is so true. I remember somebody saying that Mount Vernon Place is like a new church plant or that it's a restart. It is not. It is neither. I mean, it is very much a group of older adults who are willing to do something new. And so everything about it was because a woman, Mrs. Delaney, took in a couple that needed a place to live, and then intentional
Hmm.
community was formed. It was
Hmm.
people turning around and starting to see the young adults who were sitting behind them and then
Yeah,
befriending them. It was a men's group that had people in their 80s and people in their 20s. Right. So not starting a new men's group that was exclusive of the longtime members, but really seeking to develop community. Everything that we are today is because of a group of older adults who were willing to dream new dreams and see a new vision that God was placing on their hearts for their church.
and it's beautiful what that gift can be.
Oh my word. And I would give
Yeah,
anything for them to be able to see it today. I think about that all the time. Some of their children get to see it online, and we who worship with us online now, but I would give anything if they could see just how much their risks paid off.
absolutely. Well, that's a beautiful note to end on, and hoping that the risks that we take will be rewarded. And regardless, God is calling us to be faithful,
Amen.
whether or not you see change in your lifetime.
So
We're just
true,
called to
because
plant
right,
those seeds.
Moses didn't get to see the whole change that he led, right? He only
Yeah,
got to lead them to the
absolutely.
edge of the promised land, but not into the promised land.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the gift that this book is to the church.
Thank you for reading the book. Thank you for sharing it. And thanks for inviting me to be in conversation.